He hasn't been on the pole in 20 years, and he hasn't won at Indianapolis since 1969. But this may be Mario Andretti's year. In qualifying yesterday, Mario clocked in at 215.390 miles an hour, good enough for pole position for the 71st Indianapolis 500. It was an unusual first day of qualifying. Despite a near-record crowd, it was hot and windy, and that caused the speeds to be down from last year. There apparently will be no new track record here for the first time since 1981. Only 3 of yesterday's 11 qualifiers bettered their speed from last year. Early this month, defending champion Bobby Rahal gathered his team together for a group handshake. Rahal will start this year's race from the middle of the front row. His speed, 213.316 miles an hour. Rick Mears has been worried all month. His new Penske chassis just wasn't performing, so he qualified a year-old March. And A.J. Foyt will start his 30th 500 from the second row. The 4-time winner has his best shot in years for number 5. But other younger and less finance drivers like Stan Fox driving for Foyt and Tony Bettenhausen are still trying to go fast enough to qualify for the greatest spectacle in racing and win the coveted Ford Warner Trophy. ESPN, the world's leader in motorsports coverage, presents Speed World. To the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in one of 3 days of live coverage of time trials of this year's 500-mile race. The weather is beautiful again, at least for the fans, but it's a little warm and windy for the cars and drivers. Temperatures 85, the humidity 75%. The winds are 5 to 10 miles an hour, only a 10% chance of rain. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Jenkins, and we welcome you to our first live coverage of time trials here on ESPN for the Indianapolis 500-mile race. It's been a very unusual first weekend of time trials, yesterday and today also. Yesterday and today, the combined activity shows us there have been 31 presentations at the line, 28 qualification attempts, 14 have qualified, including 1 rookie, and the field average now is a little over 208 miles an hour, and we are live at the Speedway as Scott Brayton is on the track for a qualification attempt. Sitting along beside me is Dick Simon, who will be the oldest driver in this year's field, but Dick certainly put his car in the field solidly yesterday. He'll be starting from outside of row number 2 in the 500-mile race. Dick, Scott's on his qualification run right now, but what has been the story here basically this weekend? Why have we seen so relatively few qualifiers in the first 2 days?
Well, I think, Bob, part of it is the radial tires. We've never run them here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway before, and the high technology of the cars is such a finesse situation that the slightest little adjustment makes the cars react differently. And with the radial tires being precisely exactly the same, then all you have to do is make too much of a change and you can't get the handle on it. And I think the fact that the sun has come out added to it too as well.
Well, here we are in the late afternoon. As you can see, the shadows have now covered the entire main straightaway going into turn number 1. That always means that the track begins to cool and the speeds pick up. So we should see a very active final hour of qualifying here on this Sunday afternoon. Scott Brayton from Coldwater, Michigan on his qualification attempt. The first lap, 204.857 miles an hour. Should he take this run, Dick?
Well, based on what others are doing at this point, I would say yes, provided he doesn't slow down anymore.
Coming out of turn number 4, about to complete lap number 2 on the 10-mile, 4-lap qualification run. Scott Brayton, who has been here before, in fact, is a former track record holder at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Into turn number 2 once again, and we're getting the time and speed report on lap number 2 for Scott. And the average speed for lap number 2 is 204.425 miles an hour. And as you can see, his 2-lap average now is a little more than 204 miles an hour. Now, the field average is 208 miles an hour. So as you can see, the speeds have been down considerably this year. Does that surprise you, Dick?
Not really, because of the tire situation and also with the new technology of the cars, and they tried to slow the speeds down a little bit in the new rules. That's why you see Rick Mears in the front row with an 86.
Yeah, I think all but about 3 drivers who qualified yesterday qualified slower this year than they qualified last year, and Danny Sullivan qualified at 10 miles an hour slower this year than he did last year. Now Scott Brayton brings the car out of turn number 2 onto the backstretch. He picked up the 3rd lap considerably, 207.135 miles an hour, upping his average speed to 205.465. He'll definitely take this, Dick.
Oh, yes, definitely. That's why I thought on his first lap at a 204 plus that he should go for it, because he should get better having just been off the racetrack.
Here comes Scott Brayton off of corner number 4. Dwayne Sweeney, the chief starter for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the United States Auto Club Championship Division, waves the checkered flag, and Scott Brayton has completed his qualification run, and he moves into the starting field for this year's 500-mile race. Several pit reporters are working for us this afternoon. Look, first of all, let's go to Larry Newber.
Well, Bob, thank you very much. Derek Daly, whom you've seen on ESPN before, was supposed to be joining us on this broadcast, but you're looking at the reason why he is not talking. He's got another job, and it is more pressing. Derek Daly is getting ready to go out and attempt qualifications for this year's Indianapolis 500-mile race. This weekend, the story has been what has not happened rather than what has occurred. Bob, you have mentioned that only 13 drivers, now 15 in the last couple of minutes here, have qualified for this year's race. But beyond that, very few people have gone out and practiced. We've had 2 days of relative inactivity for about 6 hours in the middle of the day. Well, I just came from the garage area before we went on the air, and all the veteran drivers who are not in the field yet said, well, happy hour between the hours of 5 and 6. It's going to be active, so roll the cameras because we plan on going racing and qualifying. Bob, we're all set down here.
All right, thank you, Larry. Well, the 4th lap for Scott Brayton as he pulls into the pit area and the area where they take the official photographs here. The 4th lap was 206.195, and his 4-lap qualifying average was 205.647 miles an hour. So a very good run for Scott Brayton. And now, as Larry told you, it is Derek Daly who is pulling onto the speedway for a possible qualification attempt. Have you ever seen a weekend like this, Dick, really?
No, actually, I think it's a history maker. There was 28 cars here that qualified last year on first day, and a lot of it is the newness of everything. The new cars, the new radial tires, and, of course, an unusual day yesterday with 3 cars blowing engines into turn 1 and 2.
Quite a story developing here. It has developed, as a matter of fact, just this afternoon. For more on that, let's go to another pit reporter. Here is Gary Lee.
And here is 2-time champion of the Indy 500, Gordy Johncock, in 73-82, and it was 2 years ago. You surprised everyone when you said, hey, this is no longer fun, I'm walking away. But Gordy, it didn't take long for the rumors to circulate. You were trying to come back, and by golly, you are back. How did it all turn out?
Well, I hope it's going to turn out fine. You know, unfortunately for Jim Crawford, that he got hurt, and I'm going to take his ride while he's hurt. But, you know, I'm tickled to death to be back. I realized probably 4 or 5 months after I retired that I kind of made a mistake by retiring, especially after sitting at home and watching them on TV.
So obviously it didn't take long for you to accept when the telephone call came out in the Southwest and you said, I'll be back. You are back. You passed your physical on the track tomorrow?
Hopefully, yes. We'll be on sometime tomorrow morning, hopefully.
Well, as we mentioned, Jim Crawford was seriously injured in the leg area yesterday. So let's go to our 3rd colleague who is standing by in the Hanna Medical Center for an update on Jim Crawford. Here is Alan Massengale.
2, 1. Thanks, Gary. I'll be roaming around the garage area today for any stories that might come from Gasoline Alley. Plus, we'll take you around the track here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for some of the most bizarre sights you've ever seen in the world of sports. Right now, we're outside the track hospital. Remember yesterday, Jim Crawford crashed his March Buick into turn 1 nearly head-on. He was taken downtown for surgery last night. The doctor who performed the surgery, Dr. Terry Trammell, is with us now. And, Doctor, what is the latest on Jim Crawford?
He's doing very well. He's up on a ward bed, relatively comfortable with pain medication. His injuries consisted of an an injury to his left knee, both ankles, his right tibia, which is a bone between the knee and the ankle, that my partner and I, Dr. John Snyder, put back together with plates, screws, and pins. It took about 4 hours.
Now joining me, Dr. Hank Bach, who runs the track hospital. Not only is he responsible for the drivers, but this place can become like a small city on race day. Over 300,000 people to take care of, a huge responsibility.
I'd like to think that the secret word is planning. You know, we start really in April with all the doctors and nurses, Red Cross volunteers, and try to organize things so that we're ready when they hit the gates.
And, of course, an excellent job as always. Thank you for joining us, both doctors. Let's go now back to Bob Jenkins.
All right, thank you, Alan. And Derek Daly's qualification run is underway. However, he appears to be slowing down in the backstretch. The car has moved to the inside of the racetrack. His first lap was 202.844 miles an hour, and Derek apparently feeling that that just isn't strong enough to complete the run, so he has aborted it and will be pulling into the pit area. But we do have the qualification line forming here in the final hour of time trials as we bring you live time trial activity from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, brought to you by Budweiser. Beechwood Age for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you. Happy Mother's Day to everyone. We are live for the first time in ESPN history at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for time trials, and we'll be right back. For the first time in ESPN history, we are live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to bring you time trial activity. We'll be here today, also next Saturday and Sunday. As we indicated to you in our previous segment, Jim Crawford was involved in an accident yesterday during a qualification attempt. He had just taken the green flag from Dwayne Sweeney and moved into turn number 1. Dick, what happened on this crash?
Well, it looks like he dropped under the line because he had a little push and hoping that he could get down and have room to come off. But he got the line and spun as the tires hit the yellow lines.
And you can see the front end of that car was virtually torn apart. He did come to rest just entering turn number 3. The medical personnel were quickly on the scene of the accident. He was airlifted to Methodist Hospital, where you heard just a few minutes ago that he did undergo surgery yesterday, but apparently everything is going to be okay with Jim Crawford. On the racetrack for a qualification attempt is Jeff Brabham, who now makes his home in Noblesville, Indiana, about 15 miles north of Indianapolis. However, he was born in Sydney, Australia. He's driving the Valvoline-sponsored car number 15, owned by Rick Dallas, and he is in the north end of the racetrack, now entering turn number 4 on what could be a qualification attempt here. Let's see if he takes the green flag. His crew chief indicating that he has taken the green flag, and there is the completion of lap number 1 for Jeff Brabham. Waiting for the time and speed report to come in from the USAC officials. And not a bad speed for Jeff Brabham on lap number 1. It is 43.840 seconds, and that is a speed of 205.292 miles an hour.
Bob, Jeff is a very smooth driver. I would assume he would accept this lap and go on.
Going into turn number 3 once again, Jeff Brabham began racing in Formula Fords in Australia and won several events in that competition before he moved to the United States. Used to drive Super Vs. Here he comes, headed for the white flag and the completion of 3 of the, make that lap number 2, I should say. 4 laps here, 10 miles of qualifying. That's a completion of lap number 2. The shadows beginning to move over the racetrack in the front stretch, Dick, and that means a cooler track and probably a faster track.
Yes, it does. Actually, as the temperatures cool down, that's why you have happy hour here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway between 5 and 6. And as the temperatures cool down, the speeds pick up about 3 miles an hour sometimes.
Well, the second lap for Jeff Brabham was faster than the first. It's 43.610 seconds, and the speed 206.375. His 2-lap average is 205.832 miles an hour, so he also solidly in the field. Here he comes off of turn number 4, headed down the main straightaway. Got a little bit high there in turn number 4, but brings the car off the corner to come down the straightaway and takes the white flag for the completion of his 3rd lap.
Sometimes, Bob, we have stagger in the cars and a solid spool, and when they come down off of 4, that's to release the pressure that's against the tires and let the car run free, and actually picks up maybe 1 to 2 tenths.
Very consistent run for Jeff. Lap number 3 was 206.002, a little bit slower than the second lap, but faster than the first, and he's averaging 205.888 miles an hour. And Jeff Brabham is just about to complete his qualification attempt. He's in the north short chute, headed for turn number 4 once again. Here he comes swinging off the corner, And looking for that checkered flag, and there it is from Dwayne Sweeney, and we have another qualifier for this year's 500-mile race, Jeff Brabham from Noblesville, Indiana. Now, his fourth lap was his slowest, dropping down to 204.355 miles an hour. His four-lap average, 205.503. It's been a very unusual weekend of qualifying, as we have indicated to you. Here's a wrap-up of what happened yesterday here at the Speedway. 11 cars qualified yesterday in one of the strangest pole days in Indianapolis history. Mario Andretti last started from the pole position in 1967. He'll do it again in 1987. His white flag lap was his slowest, 214.327 miles an hour. But with the other three laps, the best of which was 216.3, his average is 215.3 miles an hour. That was about 2 miles an hour slower than Mario had practiced at. But it was windy and hot yesterday afternoon, and those conditions held down the speeds. Rick Mears' four-lap record of 216.828 will apparently stand in 1987. Andretti's Newman Haas Lola is powered by a Chevy Ilmore engine, a motor whose speed has been proven, but whose reliability may be a question mark. He did win with the car in the first IndyCar race of the season in Long Beach, California. Mario Andretti won the Indianapolis 500 in 1969, and he has big hopes for his 22nd Indianapolis 500-mile race.
The way these cars behave in turbulence, I think it's a bonus, especially now. I think we found this out during practice that because of the speeds, the turbulence is even tougher than last year, and to be up there in clear air, I think is a bonus, and it's worth going for.
The defending champion of the 500-mile race is Bobby Rahal from Dublin, Ohio. He'll start from the middle of row number 1. He qualified the Budweiser True Sports Lola Cosworth at a four-lap average of 213.316 miles an hour. It'll be his 6th Indianapolis 500-mile race. Bobby commented about getting the balance right on the car prior to qualifying.
The balance of the car was reasonable, but the wind did move us around quite a bit, so that affected it, and it's getting hotter out there. But if we're in the front row, second row, you know, we're where you are. Yeah, exactly, 500-mile race.
Two-time Indy champion Rick Mears struggled in the practice periods with a Penske chassis, so they called their shops in Reading, Pennsylvania, and had a 1986 March brought to the track. And Rick Mears qualified it outside of row number 1 at 211.467. A.J. Foyt in his 30th Indianapolis 500. He's looking for his 5th win and has quite a shot at it. He qualified for inside of row number 2, qualifying at 210.935 miles an hour in a Lola Cosworth.
Well, I think we still got a shot at winning this race. I didn't think I had a chance to win. I haven't won nothing big in a long time, championship cars, but I wouldn't be here. I mean, I'm not too proud. I feel I've won my share of races. I've been lucky enough to be competitive pretty much in everything I run. I have nothing to prove except to myself. Every time I get beat the last race, I got to come back and try to win.
Roberto Guerrero, who won an IndyCar race earlier this year in Phoenix, put his True Value STP March in the middle of the second row. And Dick Simon has his best starting position ever in a 500-mile race.
Today, unfortunately, the track is a little slippery in 1 and 2, and I have taken a chance with a big blower to go for the front row, and under that condition with a big blower, if you have to get out of the throttle, it hurts you bad because it takes a long time to build the momentum back up. But that was the gamble to get on the front row, and it didn't pay off, but we're still in the strong, and the race is coming.
Going to row number 3 now. On the inside will be Arie Luyendyk, the Rookie of the Year in 1985 here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. In an earlier qualification attempt, Arie Luyendyk got the car a little bit too high between turns number 1 and 2 and brushed the wall, but later he qualified at 208.337 miles an hour. Johnny Rutherford will start his 23rd Indy 500 from the middle of row number 3. He qualified at 208.296 miles an hour. And then Michael Andretti will start outside of row number 3. He put his Preco STP March Cosworth in the field at 206.129 miles an hour. Michael was the Rookie of the Year here in 1984. Then in row number 4 for this this year's 500-mile race. On the inside will be Emerson Fittipaldi in the March Ilmore Chevy, qualifying at 205.584. And in the middle of row number 4, Danny Sullivan in the Penske Ilmore Chevy with a qualifying average of 205.288. And so far today here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the qualifiers, Ludwig Heimrath Jr. will be starting outside of row number 4. Qualified at 207.591. Then in row number 5, it'll be Rich Vogler in car number 81, Scott Brayton in 91, and Jeff Brabham in number 15. And all alone in row number 6 with Gary Bettenhausen in car number 56. That's the way the field stands at this moment. However, we have more qualifiers that will be making an attempt here later this afternoon. Now, Davy Jones, driving for A.J. Foyt, has been on the racetrack in the past few minutes. However, he did not make a qualification attempt. Alan Jr. may be making one in just a moment. We'll be motoring out of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this evening to get home in time to see the third game of that Montreal Canadian, make it fourth game of the Canadians and Flyers NHL Stanley Cup Series. The Flyers lead that series 2-1. That's live tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern Time here on ESPN. Well, Tom Sneva has had a very tough month here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. In activity earlier in the month, Tom got into some trouble up in the south end of the racetrack and had a crash. And then he was also in trouble here at the Speedway earlier today. The car coming in contact with the wall between turns 2 and 3. Make that 1 and 2. And the right side of the car was pretty much torn away. Gary Lee caught up with him and talked to him.
Tom, once again, a case of lightning striking twice. In your assessment, is the same problem you had earlier the same problem these other cars are having?
It's hard to say. You know, it's that one acted very similar to the first one, but it shouldn't have acted that way because the adjustment we made should have been helping that problem and not compounding it. So I don't know. It just I can't quite figure it out right now.
Your crew's had, I think, 2 days to work on the primary car that was damaged earlier. So where does this put your program now for qualifying?
Well, we don't have anything left right now. You know, unfortunately for the guys, we're going to have to work this week and try to get one of the cars back together.
Well, all month long, Dick Simon, they have been talking about the new marches that have been having handling problems. Now, this is George Snyder on the racetrack in one of the A.J. Foyt cars again. Davy Jones was out on a Foyt car just a few minutes ago and did not attempt the run. However, George Snyder has taken the green flag and is on his 4 laps of qualifying. They've been talking about the marches handling poorly. What are they talking about, Dick?
Well, they're talking about actually the push that comes into the car unexpectedly, and some of that is the mannerisms in which you set up the spring ratios front to rear. That's what we found as during our rookie orientation test here with Davy Jones and also Ludwig Heimrath. You'll notice George twitched a little bit coming through 1 there on the camera, and that's the rear end being loose. A.J. Foyt is very smart, and he probably set up George to be just a little loose to start with for a slippery track in 1 and 2, and we'll see what happens.
Snyder from Bakersfield, California on lap number 1 of his qualification attempt. Now this is a V6 Chevy that is in this car as he completes lap number 1. We'll see what the speed elates to, and it's not a bad speed for George Snyder. It's 206.597 miles an hour, so Snyder is moving that car well.
That's to be expected, I think, from the man that's helping him there, and of course George is a fantastic driver and has always been around a long time, and he knows just how far to push it. Unfortunately for Tom, I don't know what the situation was. Tom is a very smart driver too. There's just an unusual situation there, but I don't think it's the tires. I think it's the setups.
You know, we were all very surprised earlier this week when George Snyder took that car out for practice, because he usually jumps in this car on the last weekend of time trials with just a very few laps of practice and puts it in the field. And this time, or this year, he has had 2, 3, 4 days of practice.
George, as you say, has had an unusual situation with A.J. In fact, I was quite surprised to see A.J. do that. But he came here well prepared with a number of cars, and I think that...
Oh, he's spinning!
He lost it, as I said. He was a little loose there, Bob, and that's unfortunate.
And he is going to make contact with the wall. We thought perhaps that he was going to keep it off the inside retaining wall, but he did make contact coming out of turn number 2. It was a very consistent run that George Snyder had going for him. His first lap was 43.563 seconds. The second lap, 43.566 seconds. Just a tick of the watch slower on lap number 2. 206.597 was the first lap, and 206.583 was the second lap. Here's a replay now.
You know, watch this, Bob, and you'll see that as he's loose, in contrast to Tom Sneva, who was pushing, and AJ was trying to compensate for the push, and just a little bit too much. The rear wheel's breaking loose as the car comes around, and the driver is trying to correct for it and do a 360 and come out of it. With Tom Sneva's situation, the front end let loose, and he went straight to the wall, unable to steer. As the driver is spinning there, of course, he's trying to keep a neutral position to where he can come off the turn and come back down the straightaway. If you don't catch it at the right moment, what happened to George there does happen to you, and you'll go on to the inside wall.
I thought he might be able to keep that car away from the wall, but he did slide to the inside and hit the retaining wall with the right rear of the car. You can see the emergency personnel there on the scene of the accident, and we're waiting for a definite word on whether George Snyder received any injuries in that crash. Didn't hit the wall all that hard, though, it didn't look like, Dick.
No, he didn't. As I say, I noticed he was twitching a little bit coming through the turns there, and unfortunately, it just got away from him. I didn't expect that from George. He's very, very, very good at holding a loose car.
Well, George Snyder, going into today's run, had the record for the most consistent qualifying run in the history of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he had a very consistent run going here this afternoon, but he did lose control in turn number 2, and the car out from under him, striking the inside wall just out of turn number 2. We'll be back with more as we are live for time trials at Indianapolis.
We're back live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and a gentleman that has come from therapy this afternoon to make a special trip out here to be live on ESPN is Dennis Firestone, who crashed last Tuesday, but they're telling me that you're coming along well. You'll be back in the cockpit next week.
Yes, you saved me from therapy. I needed a little day out the track. I haven't been out here since Tuesday, and it's nice to be back with my friends. You know, between the hospital and then eventually therapy, it's occupied all my time since the accident.
Well, of course, 2 bones broken in the foot, surgery required there. We have a broken shin bone, but no cast. I see a special wrap and a special driving boot.
That's part of the plan. We put a plate in the bottom of my foot to hold the bones together so that I would have the ability to drive this coming week.
So the crew has acquired a new 87 Lola for you. It's going together back in the garage area. You have a few more physicals to go through before you'll be okay to drive, though.
Right. The car should actually be ready on Tuesday, and it's probably going to be shaken down by Phil Kruger Tuesday or Wednesday, and then hopefully things go well. I'll be back Thursday to step into it and take it nice and easy and get up to speed and try to get back to where we left off.
I appreciate you coming out, and all the fans would love to see you back in that race car next week. Thanks for coming out, Dennis.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can bring a little excitement to next weekend.
Well, Larry Newber is standing by because we may have a qualification attempt momentarily by Al Unser Jr.
Absolutely right, Gary. This 25-year-old driver that many people think will sit in victory lane someday here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has just received the final instructions from Chief Steward Tom Binford. A last-moment conversation with crew chief Dennis Swan, and Al Unser Jr. has crawled behind the wheel of this 1987 March. Remember that this team was one of the standard bearers of Lola until this year. They made the switch over the winter. At this point, that switch looks, well, like maybe it wasn't the wisest of ideas, at least for here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Al Unser Jr. was out several times this afternoon. We mentioned earlier in the show that few people practice. Al was one of them. His best speed so far, 2:05. I talked to him momentarily. He said, I think there's more left in these hands, but only time and the weather, and maybe the shade on the track will tell. Bob?
All right, Al Unser Jr. getting strapped in that car, and Snyder's car, meanwhile, George Snyder's car, is being taken from the racetrack. He did come in contact with the inside wall coming off turn number 2 on his 3rd lap of qualifying. He had completed laps in excess of 206.5 miles an hour when he lost control in turn number 2. So we are down for just a moment. However, Alan Massengale, who is visiting Indianapolis from ESPN Sports Center, is roaming the grounds of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and has this report from turn 5.
So you think these auto racing fans might be missing out on the NBA playoffs? No, 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 no. The IBA is now in session. The Infield Basketball Association, time for the slam dunk contest.
There is always something going on at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. If there isn't action on the track, there is action off the track. Al Unser Jr. is still waiting to go onto the racetrack to try to make this year's starting field for the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Skyline of downtown Indianapolis, just off the backstretch of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And we're here today, and we'll be here next weekend also at 5 o'clock Eastern Time next Saturday. And then the Bubble Show on Sunday at 5:30 Eastern Time. That's when we'll do all the bumping in an effort to get into the field. On the racetrack will be Al Unser Jr. from Albuquerque, New Mexico, trying to make this year's field. He has been driving a Lola the past few years. However, he has switched to March. And Dick Simon has been a Lola supporter for many years now. Dick, what about this switch?
Well, actually, we were March supporters for a long time, Bob, and last year we chose Lolas due to Raul Boisel and our chief mechanic, Sal Incandela. And we were going to go to the Marches again, as I had been there, and when we were at the March factory, they did not want to show us the wind tunnel tests and asked us to go on the results that they have had in finishes. I went to the Lola factory. They opened their books on the wind tunnel tests and showed us the difference between last year's car and this year's car, and saw the little mock-up of the car, and I felt that the aerodynamics were so much better and the downforce was the same, and we chose Lola on that basis. I think that Al Unser Senior's, or Junior's owner, Doug Shearson, was at March factory the same time I was, and he bought the fact that March had been winners all along, and I think this year Lola made an extra effort, and they deserve the award for the most aggressive progress made.
That's a very interesting story, because we have seen several switch from March to Lola, including the defending champion of this race, Bobby Rahal. And when you look at the results from yesterday, you've got to acknowledge at least that Lola may be very strong in this year's 500-mile race. Well, here's the average of Al Unser Jr. It's not good, Dick. It's 201.423, a very big disappointment. Let's go to Larry Newber, who's with Al Unser Jr.'s dad.
Well, Bob, Al Unser Sr., who himself has been in over 20 Indianapolis 500-mile races, even though he's been in so many of the races, it's still very important to him to how his son does. And right now, a lot of disappointment down here. Al was following the progress of Al Jr. in the clocks, and as the first lap time came in, it really was kind of a crushing blow. And he's right now in deep concentration. He doesn't really have a call as far as the team goes as to whether or not Al's going to come in, but he's very much involved in what's going on. And Al, got to be a bit of a disappointment, yes?
Well, it is, on any driver's part, especially for my son, they just don't have their car working yet, and, those things happen.
Now, we appreciate you talking to us, and the interesting thing here is the yellow flag has now come out, is that the emotion of running or winning or entering the 500-mile race, qualifying for it, it's still very prevalent, even in all of your minds, despite the number of years you've been here.
Yeah, this place has its habits about doing that, and for some reason, I think any race, but this one's the one that everybody's after, and this one's, as you said, it has something to it. Why, I don't know.
Al, have the two of you had any conversations now that this attempt has gone by the wayside? What do you think it will take? You're probably not going to get another attempt until next week.
Not really. We haven't, talked about that whatsoever. other people talking, you know, you can say anywhere from 204 on up, but you know, it all depends what happens this week in the weather. If all of a sudden the weather comes in and helps the track, or the weather comes in and then nobody gets to run. So, you know, you might then look back and say, well, we should have taken what we had, but, you know, that's just the way this place is.
Thanks a lot, Al. Bob, back to you.
Thank you, Larry. Al Unser Jr. has aborted the qualification attempt. His first lap was well under what most people think it's going to take to make the field. It was 201.423, and that little Al has taken that car into the north area of the pits, and his owner, Doug Shearson, is looking over the situation and very disappointed, obviously. A lot of tradition and heritage surrounding the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and here right now is another Legends of the Brickyard. Indy 500 speed barriers are made to be broken, and back in 1977, Tom Sneva cracked the 200-mile-an-hour barrier. 15 years prior to that, in '62, Parnelli Jones, driving for J.C. Agajanian, qualified at 150.729, the first over the 150 mark. And longtime Indy 500 sponsor Phil Hedback presented Parnelli with 150 silver dollars. And Hedback was there in '77 when Sneva achieved the 200 mark with 200 silver dollars and an enthusiastic handshake. 16 drivers have qualified for this year's Indianapolis 500-mile race, and we have the qualifying line still formed at the north end of the track. More qualification attempts in just a moment when we return to Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm Bob Jenkins, along with Dick Simon, Larry Newberg, Gary Lee, and Alan Massengale. We are live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the second day of time trials, and we have 16 cars now in the field. And there is Jeff McPherson from Rancho Santa Margarita, California, who is attempting to make his way into the Indianapolis 500 for the very first time. If he does qualify for the race, he'll be the second rookie in this year's field. Earlier today, Ludwig Heimrath Jr. qualified a car owned by Dick Simon and put it in the field nicely. You got to be very proud of him, Dick.
We are, Bob, tremendously, because he was smooth right from the start of the rookie orientation test, and I have to say he's the best rookie driver I've ever seen in my life.
And that's saying a lot. Jeff McPherson has taken the green flag. He is on lap number 1. This young man grew up in California and actually started racing in off-road competition out in Arizona. That was back in 1973. Dick, he's dropped to the middle of the backstretch. Is that the groove? Is that the way you're supposed to do it?
Well, some drivers do drop down a little bit because the stagger in the cars causes the car to pull a little bit left. And if you look at your gauges a little bit there, Bob, the car could get a little bit more left than you want it, but it's not a serious thing if you don't jerk it back and just bring it gradually back.
Well, he did not bring the car very high off the fourth turn wall. He's in the middle of the racetrack right now and completes the first lap of qualifying. Jeff McPherson has turned in a speed not too bad. It's 205.555 miles an hour. That's a time of 43.784. So although that car isn't taking as much racetrack as a lot of others we have seen, he's doing quite well.
Yes, he is, Bob. Actually coming off the turn with about a foot to spare there as he comes up against the wall and using the lower part of the track is not a bad approach with the track conditions the way they are. And his car seems to be set up fairly well, and Jeff's doing a good job.
Last year, Jeff McPherson concentrated by and large in Europe in the Formula 3000 series. Here is the second lap of qualifying completed for Jeff McPherson. First lap was just in excess of 205.5 miles an hour, and the second lap is even quicker than the first. It's 43.750. The speed 205.714. That's an average of 205.6 for the 2 laps.
Bob, you'll find that in the rookie orientation test, he ran the same groove almost that he's running now, except he's coming off just a little higher. As the next week goes, Jeff will increase coming out and getting the letting the car go free. And as he lets the car go free and comes out towards the wall, his speeds will even pick up more.
Off of corner number 4, once again, he'll be receiving the white flag this time around.
Watch as Jeff comes out of the turn. You'll notice that he kind of holds it down away from the wall. And with the, as we call the stagger in the tires, that's a solid spool in the rear with the tire on the left being smaller than the tire on the right. And it causes the car to want to to turn slightly, and you hold that a certain direction, and it causes scrubbing off speed. And as you let the car go free, he will pick up speed, and that comes with experience.
And there is the speed. He picked it up on the third lap. It's 2:05.766. He's averaging 2:05.6 miles an hour and is just about finished with his 10-mile run. Jeff McPherson completed 3 IndyCar races last year on the road courses, Mid-Ohio, Elkhart Lake, and Laguna Seca. He doesn't have that much experience on the ovals, but he has done a fine job here in Indianapolis on a Sunday evening as he is qualified for his first 500-mile race. And we'll stand by now and give you the time and speed report on lap number 4. And the fourth lap was 205.719, a very consistent run. His 4-lap average is 205.688 miles an hour. So he is our second rookie in the field. He is not the fastest because Ludwig Heimrath Jr. still has that distinction. Heimrath qualified at 207.591 earlier today. Pancho Carter from Brownsburg, Indiana. He's being wheeled to the qualifying line as we present live for you time trials from Indianapolis.
ESPN is live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and our second rookie qualifier today is Jeff McPherson. And your comment was, dang, I wasn't the fastest.
No, I would have liked to have been the quickest today. It was worth something as well.
Obviously, as a rookie, it's a real workout to come here, but you've had some difficulties this week. You've been faster, but the track just went away.
Yeah, it went away, and we kind of wandered along with it. We've had a little bit of mechanical trouble, but I'd like to say that luckily we recovered from it, and we're able to get in today.
What's it mean to a rookie to qualify for what appears to be the world's greatest race?
Well, I'd say that it was number one, and it really means a lot. This is tremendously exciting. Just the pressure that's gone, I can't even begin to tell you.
So now you can get it all over with this weekend and enjoy next week and setting the car up for the race. Congratulations, Jeff.
Thanks very much.
Very happy rookie, Jeff McPherson.
Well, Dick Simon, you have qualified for many 500-mile races, and I get the idea every time they talk to you after you complete a qualification run, you're just as happy as you probably were that very first time you qualified for a race.
Yes, actually, Bob, when I first came here, the palms of my hands were perspiring terribly, and I thought to myself, I hope I can get this first year over with so that I can settle down, and each year gets even more nervous.
This will be Dick Simon's 16th Indianapolis 500, and once again, he'll be starting from outside of row number 2. And we have 17 drivers now qualified for this year's 500-mile race. Row number 1, again, is Mario Andretti, Bobby Rahal, and Rick Mears. Row 2, A.J. Foyt, Roberto Guerrero, and Dick Simon. In row number 3, it will be Ari Luyendyk with Johnny Rutherford and Michael Andretti. Then in row number 4, it's Emerson Fittipaldi, followed by Danny Sullivan. Then today's qualifiers, Ludwig Heimrath Jr. at 207.591. In row number 5, Rich Vogler at 205.887. Jeff McPherson just qualified at 205.688. Then Scott Brayton at 205.647. In row number 6 at the moment is Jeff Brabham at 205.503. And Gary Bettenhausen at 204.504. The engine that McPherson and Brabham are running, Dick, is a Honda engine. Another challenge to the Cosworth domination.
Yes, actually, the Hondas, the Buicks, and the Ilmore Chevys have made a very giant step forward into entering the field of which Cosworth has owned for a number of years. I remember in 1970 when I came here, Al Unser Sr. had been running the Cosworths a little bit prematurely to most people, broke, and then finally won, and then everybody kind of jumped onto the Cosworths, and it's been Cosworth that ate up the four-cylinder offies and then has had a domination until now.
Boy, you got to really salute this guy, Pancho Carter, who's getting the gloves on and getting set to go out on his qualification attempt. He has had a very interesting month, to say the least. Dick, here is his accident from last Sunday.
As he's losing the rear there, you can see his car sliding and coming back around, and he does a magnificent job of saving that car, and then all of a sudden air got underneath it and lifted it up into the air, as you saw, like an airplane. Unfortunately, Pancho is one lucky fellow. The good Lord was on his side, because that's unusual to wipe off a roll bar and not get hurt, and it's a real blessing that he had a good helmet on.
It really was. The helmet had 3 holes rubbed in it, almost to the styrofoam, but Pancho Carter was okay from that accident, and here he goes. He is moving on to the speedway and here it is. There are the 3 holes that were rubbed in that helmet as he slid from the middle of the north short chute all the way to turn number 4 on his head. And And there is Pancho Carter now, and he is going on to the racetrack for a qualification attempt. He will possibly become our 18th qualifier for this year's 500-mile race. He has competed in 13 Indianapolis 500s to date. And Pancho Carter lives in Brownsburg, Indiana. Of course, a second-generation driver.
One of the things I was just noticing here, Bob, Jeff McPherson did a magnificent job of consistent laps. I was thinking that Ludwig not only had the fast time for the rookies, but the most consistent. But I think Jeff McPherson just took that away with his average speeds at 205, 205, 205, and a 205.
What does that mean? Does that mean that you're flat on the accelerator all the way around the racetrack?
It means that the driver and the car are kind of communicating together, and he is satisfied with exactly what he's doing. He's either driving it at the ultimate edge, and that's all he feels he can get out of it, or else the tires are heating up and the car is slightly going away from him if it's not consistent.
You know, Dick, I think one of the most interesting stories of what's happened here this week, it seemed like that yesterday, a lot of these drivers who were turning 205, 206, 207 were a little hesitant to take it, thinking that a lot of drivers will have now a complete week of practice to work up to the speeds, and they weren't real sure that those 205s, 206s, and 207s would make the race, but I think they will, don't you?
Yes, I do, without a question. I'm sure Michael Andretti, who waved off after going 209, 207, and then all of a sudden waved off, would just give his eye teeth to not be sitting with a 205, but I don't think he's in any problem. Plus the fact Bobby has a backup car there, and he should be all right.
All right, we'll see if Pancho takes the green flag. Yes, he does. He's on his qualification run. What do you think it will take to make the field? Will it take a speed of 209 as it did last year, or will we see possibly something a little bit less than that?
Definitely less. In fact, I think this year, with all of the changes and things that have happened, the radial tires, the changes in the cars and whatnot, that you'll see probably 205 at the very, very worst make the field.
What are you going to do now this next week? Do you relax a little bit, or do you go out on the speedway and run race day setups to get ready for the big 500?
Well, fortunately, both our cars are qualified, and for the first time in the Big Simon Racing team, we're going to have an opportunity to do a week of full load testing and that type of thing, and it has to be an advantage for us, particularly since we were here running all week very competitively, and Ludwig is a tremendous driver. Give him a little more time, and I do believe he's going to be extremely competitive, and of course myself, it's the best I've ever run here.
And there is Pancho Carter's first lap. It's 203.597 on the borderline. Comes very close to the wall coming out of turn number 2. Now, Dick, we've talked about the radial tires before, but this is the very first time they have ever run them at Indianapolis. Can you tell a difference?
Only in the fact that the car, if you don't change the cambers, in other words, the radial tire is much better than the bias. Bias tire meaning non-radial. The bias tire last year, we had a problem, and the years before, as they heated up, they would expand, and the radial tire doesn't expand. I think it's a tremendous advantage, but the teams and the technology that goes with it has to be learned by each of us, and some of us have got a handle on it, and some of us haven't. And you'll notice Pancho Carter here is coming very close to the wall. Pancho is very fast at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and most of the tracks, and he comes right up next to the wall, lets the car go free. Now, in comparison to Jeff's, he's letting it see how he comes up and then doesn't jerk it off the wall too fast, but lets it come down away from the turbulence and goes from there.
So he has 2 laps in excess of 203.5 miles an hour, and he's at the north end of the racetrack on lap number 3. Pancho Carter from Brownsburg, Indiana. First drove in a championship race in 1974, and he's been around for many, many years. Again, this will be his 14th Indianapolis 500-mile race. The white flag goes out, and one more lap to go. One more tour of the 2.5 miles for Pancho Carter.
This is a case, Bob, where Pancho is letting off the gas very smoothly, trying to get the utmost out of the car. But did you see that little twitch there? He just touched the wall. The back end got loose. That's part of the reason he's running so as a slower. He's keeping it very smooth, but his speed is not able to come up because he could not stay into the throttle.
He's about a mile an hour faster on lap number 3, up to 204.536. His 3-lap average is 203.8 now, and we'll see if the crew allows him to...
He shouldn't take it, Bob.
He should not?
No, not at this point.
All right, let's see if he does not. You'll see the crew on the right side of your screen display the yellow flag. If they don't want him to take it, they're going to let him accept it. The checkered flag goes out, and the 17th qualifier of the weekend has completed his run. That is Pancho Carter with an average of 203.781 miles an hour, and we'll be right back. Here's the lineup as it stands for this year's 500-mile race. On the front row is Mario Andretti, Bobby Rahal and Rick Mears. Row 2, A.J. Foyt, Roberto Guerrero, and Dick Simon. In the third row, Ari Lyondike, Johnny Rutherford, and Michael Andretti. The fourth row, Emerson Fittipaldi, Danny Sullivan, and Ludwig Heimrat Jr. In row number 5, Rich Vogler, Jeff McPherson, and Scott Brayton. The sixth row, Jeff Brabham, Gary Bettenhausen, and Pancho Carter. That's the field as it stands for this year's 500-mile race, but we'll have more time trials for you next weekend here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
From Great Britain, Zevo.
And bring you qualifying from here at the famed Brickyard at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, then on Sunday at 5:30 Eastern Time. The Belgium Grand Prix will also be here on ESPN Sunday, 3:30 next week. We thank you for joining us, and our thanks to ABC Facilities for all the help they gave us. We Daylight Time, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Philadelphia Flyers. For Larry Newberg, Gary Lee, Alan Maskingale, and Dick Simon, this is Bob Jenkins. Thanks for joining us at Indianapolis. For now, so long, everyone.